Okay, everybody. Hi, welcome again. This is Dan Cirucci, and I'm with Ann and Jerry Klein. They're dear friends of mine for many years, but they're also seasoned world travelers. And you folks have just come back from one of your many world adventures, but you were like just on the cusp of this whole virus crisis. I mean, you've got a real story to tell. Tell us about it.
Well, we were on the Viking Jupiter with a cruise around South America, and I can just show you the map of where we were. We left from actually Valparaiso, Chile, went down the west coast of South America, down around Cape Horn, which is the southern tip of South America, to the Falkland Islands. We had to skip Porto Madryn on the east coast because of bad weather, but then we went up to Montevideo and then Buenos Aires. So it was an interesting trip, fascinating trip. But we were listening to the news and hearing everything about coronavirus while we were on the trip, saying, "Gee, is this going to affect us?" Well, in fact, it did affect us because we had to cut the trip short by a day, because if we had left Buenos Aires when we planned to leave, we couldn't have left because they closed the airport. So we got out one day in advance and fortunately did get home safe and sound, no problems.
Well, now
the amazing thing, Dan, was that they canceled all the trips to Iguazu Falls and all the extensions to the Pampas and that sort of thing. So we never got to Iguazu Falls, and we were hoping we would get there the last day of the trip.
Yeah, I mean that's a major point on the trip, isn't it? I understand it's spectacular, Iguazu Falls.
That's what we understand too.
But how many days was the trip?
It was about 18 days.
Almost 3 weeks.
Almost 3 weeks. We had planned to spend 3 days in Buenos Aires, and it ended up being 2. But unfortunately, most of that time we were locked in the hotel.
Oh my! Now I know that you're big fans of Viking.
Mm-hmm.
We are.
Yeah, we've done 8 or 9 cruises so far, and we have 3 cruises booked in the future. And as Ann was saying, one of those is next January, so that might be up in the air. We don't know yet.
Yeah.
We were invited because of the episode on the Viking Sky. We were invited to join the CEO of Viking Cruises on a maiden voyage of the Viking Venus, but the Viking Venus is being built in Italy, and that's the end of January of next year, but I don't know. I don't think we're going to get on it.
So that maiden voyage of the Venus is going to be where?
From Rome to Barcelona.
Oh, it sounds marvelous.
Yeah. For those of your listeners who don't know what the Viking Sky was, back in March of last year, we went on a trip to see the Northern Lights. We were above the Arctic Circle in Norway, many stops up there. We went snowmobiling and dog sledding and did all sorts of fun things. But on the way back, the weather got very rough on the North Sea, to the point where the engines broke down on our ship, and we had to sit in the auditorium for 25 hours with our life jackets on while they stabilized the ship and got us back into port. So that trip was cut a day short too. And as a result of that, they refunded all of our money for that trip and gave us another free trip, and then this one on the Viking Venus coming up in January.
You were 25 hours in one place with your life jackets.
That's right.
That was like
and what was so amazing, Dan, is that we were sitting in the cafeteria having lunch, having this wonderful conversation with this lady from Britain while everything was falling off the tables, and the soda cans were falling off the carts. But we were so accustomed to having rough weather because we had this small boat with a deep V hull, so it would tilt back and forth. So we didn't
Right.
think anything of it. But we got back to our cabin, and they were trying to put some things away, and they said, go in the bedroom and shut the door, and we'll take care of it. The next thing we heard was the captain saying, this is not a drill. Please go to your muster station. And we got to the muster station, and they handed out the life jackets. So that was not, it was so funny though. It was like when my father was in a coma at the Mayo Clinic, and I just never thought I was going to die, but I hadn't planned on dying that way. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I know you guys wrote about it on your blog. You have a blog. What's it under? How do we find it?
Go to www.akleinpr.com. That's AKLEINPR.com/WP.
Okay, and on there, you've written up about your various travels. I mean, you've been traveling all over the world, like for decades, right?
Yeah, we, as you know, and as some people may know, we had a public relations firm called Dan Klein Communications Group. It was founded in 1982, and a few years in, we became members of an international PR organization called Pinnacle Worldwide,
Right.
which sadly no longer exists. But I became a senior officer of that organization, treasurer, president emeritus, or rather president-elect, president, chairman, and then chairman emeritus over a course of about 10 or 12 years. And as an international organization, we had meetings all over the world. So we
Right.
took advantage of Pinnacle Worldwide to travel all over the world.
I mean, my goodness, as business people, you were globalists long before there was such a term. I've got to give you a lot of
That's
credit
right.
on that.
Well, global travel, not so much worrying about every other country that we went
Okay.
to, but globalists in the sense of travel.
But you've both always had a great curiosity about other cultures and other countries, right?
Oh, sure. Oh, sure. I mean, anybody who travels will know that our culture in the United States is different from the cultures in many other parts of the world.
Mhm.
And it is a great educational experience to go and sample those cultures and to see what the rest of the world is about.
Right. I know that's one of the passions the two of you share. And
Yeah,
that
we have.
And
and
then
that
since we've been retired, for a number of years, we took automobile trips through Europe with a very good friend of ours who lives in London. Then in 2016, our friend said, it's getting a little bit dangerous on the continent. I would recommend that you take a cruise instead.
uh-huh.
So the summer of 2016, we took a Viking cruise in the Baltic, Scandinavia, Russia, and Germany, Poland, Estonia, those kinds of countries. And we were just hooked on cruising from that. It was a fantastic cruise. So
Well,
we've, since 2016, as I say, we've been on 7 or 8 cruises.
and having taken many cruises myself, along with my wife, who has a zest for travel, I really love it as a way to get around because it's so convenient. You just drop your bags in your room and that's it. And every day you're in a new place and a new adventure, and you get treated like royalty.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
Yeah.
and I know the two of you also share a great love for winter sports.
Mm-hmm. We are both skiers. I play ice hockey, although I don't let Ann skate anymore because she's had too many mishaps on skates. But we were skiing in, what was it, February of this year? Yeah, we were
Yeah.
out in Deer Valley, Utah, which is right next to Park City. So we have been skiing every year for probably the past 40 years.
Unbelievable. That's marvelous, marvelous. Now, in this last trip, you got to Buenos Aires, which was sort of the terminus of the trip around South America, and you were
Right.
going to meet friends, and then tell us about your experience in your hotel there.
Well, it was so crazy. We met friends whose last name is Cia, SCEIA, and they were Jerry's trying to get up a picture of them. They are also Cias, SCEIA, and they are Cias. And do you want to share that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I see.
I am.
I
Did
see
you
the
see that?
photo. Yes, quite a
Yeah.
lovely group.
Yeah, and I met these guys and Maria, who's married to Esteban, on the right of my screen. I'm not sure the way you're seeing
Yeah,
it,
that's where it is.
but Maria and Esteban, I met them first, and then I met Hernan, who's next to me in the plaid shirt, and their last name is Cia, but we are no relationship to one another, which is so funny. And we know how we got our name because that was a mistake in immigration, but they have no idea how they got their name. None at all.
Oh, that's interesting.
So,
Did you like meet them through
so
the internet?
it was really fun. And Maria and Esteban took us to see Buenos Aires on the Sunday. And we got back to the hotel, and there were all sorts of guards and military outside the front entrance, and they checked everybody in to make sure that we were residents of the hotel. But then we could not leave. And so what was even more interesting is that there was another American in the elevator, and he said to me, he said, "We're Americans, we're not used to being locked down." But we could not leave. We could not leave that night. And Esteban's brother-in-law Hernan and his wife had made an Italian dinner for us, and they came to pick us up, and we could not leave the hotel. And it was really a shame because Hernan had brought their mother, and she was so lovely and so sweet, and she talked to the guards in Spanish. They could have cared less. So the next day, though, we dinner for me was a club sandwich, and I can't remember. And Jerry had a hamburger. That was ridiculous. So the next day, Hernan came to pick us up, and they had a list. The military had a list of everybody that was quarantined, and so we were not on the list. So we were allowed to leave. So Hernan drove us an hour north of Buenos Aires to San Isidro, where he lives, and we met his wife and his son, but only for a couple of minutes. It was such a shame. And then Jerry was nervous. He had to get back. We had to get back because we had a flight that night. And so that was our big story for Buenos Aires. And I am so disappointed we did not get to see more of Buenos Aires.
Buenos Aires is a beautiful city. It's very large. The city and surrounding area is about 16 million people. And it's a very, at least in the center, it's a very modern city, and in the outskirts, it's just beautiful. Lots of greenery. So it's a fascinating city. We wish we could have seen more.
Were you on like one of the last flights out of there?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. I don't think ours was exactly the last flight. It was probably the last flight to New York. There were a few flights, few people leaving after us, going to places like Dallas and other spots, but ours was the last flight out of to New York.
And we left around 10:30 at night, and the airport was closing at midnight. So any flight that was delayed, if you were in the airport, you got to go on your flight. But if you got there late, too bad.
So, I mean,
It was really very scary.
and then when you came home, when you got home, you had to self-quarantine for what, 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah.
I have not been out of the house. I have not been shopping. I have not gone anywhere except for walks.
And that 2 weeks has turned into almost a month now. So we, other than 2 or 3 shopping trips, and very quick shopping trips, neither one of us has been out of the house except for some walks.
Right. Okay.
Jerry does the shopping, and he wipes everything down with Lysol. We had bought some extra Lysol wipes when we went down to South America, only
Right.
because one of my crazy friends
Right.
told me she wipes everything down. So we thought, oh well, we might as well try it too. And little did we
This
know.
was before any, really you heard almost anything about coronavirus.
Right.
But,
Did any,
we just,
did any people on your ship get the virus?
no.
Nobody.
No one that we know of. Everybody, there was no, notice that anybody was sick. Everybody was allowed off the ship. So as far as I know, nobody had any problems.
Oh,
Although I guess 2 or 3 trips back, they did write to us and told us that somebody had come down with something, but we never got anything. And
Yeah.
so Viking is very good about, well, we had to wash our hands before every meal.
Right.
And there have always been all sorts of hand sanitizers, and there are hand sanitizers when you come back on the ship, and and they hand you a towel to wipe down your hands and your face. So Viking has always been very, very good about that.
Yeah.
And the fortunate part of this trip was it was around South America, and at that time there was very little incidence of coronavirus anywhere in South America.
Right.
So we weren't really exposed to anything.
You were very fortunate in that respect. Jerry, do you want to show us a few pictures, just a few?
Sure. Let me go back here. I'm going to speed back here. Oops. Okay. This is a view of the central square in Valparaiso, which was which was where we boarded the ship. Very interesting city. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of political unrest in Chile, so there was a lot of graffiti around Valparaiso, and it certainly wasn't as interesting a place as it could have been. Our next stop, we were at a port called Puerto Montt, and from there we took an excursion on a lake called Emerald Lake. One of the points of interest, there are 2 volcanoes nearby, which we'll see in a moment, but thousands and thousands of years ago, the volcanoes erupted and formed this basin, which now have waterfalls going through all the lava rock. So it was an interesting sight to see. There's one of the volcanoes. It's still active. In fact, we went with Ann's cousin Charlie and his wife Marie, and they're the 2 of us. And if you look between Ann and Marie, you can see the volcano I just showed you. And then on the far right of the picture is the other volcano. And this is across another lake whose name I forget at the moment, and I probably couldn't pronounce it if I did remember it.
It's L-I. It's Lily-Hoo. It looks like I couldn't pronounce it.
Okay.
But Jerry, why don't you?
Yeah, I can't pronounce it. I just looked it up. The next day was a trip through the Chilean fjords, and it was just a fascinating trip. As you can see, it was overcast that day, and so the light and the shading was made for some really interesting pictures. And here's another view of it.
Wow, yes.
You know, between the sky and the sea and the mountains, really fascinating. The
Beautiful.
following day, we took an excursion to the Himalaya Glacier, and there's a view of it as we were getting close, and then we got right to the base of the glacier where it enters the sea. And
That's magnificent.
yeah,
That was on the ship.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
on the
These
ship.
these pictures this is from the ship. So the next day, you see the red line. That is the Strait of Magellan. That is where Magellan sailed from the Atlantic Ocean through Chile and out to the Pacific Ocean. Now,
There
what
you
we
are.
did, you can see the Strait of Magellan down at the bottom, and then we took that little excursion up to Punta Arenas in Chile, which is the capital of that particular area. Now, the next day, we went to another port called Ushuaia, which is on the Beagle Channel. And the Beagle Channel is where Charles Darwin did his exploration. So this is a very historic area down there.
And I love, and Ushuaia is calls itself the end of the world. And that's where all the ships go to, when they're going to Antarctica, they all stop at Ushuaia.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
There's
Yeah.
a picture of Ushuaia with the mountains in the background.
Mhm.
And there's us standing at the port on the big sign of Ushuaia. And then the following day, it was down to Cape Horn, which is the absolute southern tip of South America.
Right.
And we went a little further south than that. Cape Horn is the tall peak that you see on the left of the picture.
Oh,
and
wow.
here we are looking north towards the southern tip of South America.
And it was so calm. Even the staff captain told us that he's never seen it so calm.
We were lucky.
Yeah, we were lucky.
Beautiful.
We were extremely lucky. Yeah, that was fun.
Then actually this took 2 days to get from Cape Horn up to the Falkland Islands. And if you're a history buff, you may remember that in I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, Argentina tried to invade the Falkland Islands and take them away from the British. But after about an 8-day war, the British succeeded, and they kept the Falkland Islands. It's a beautiful little area, and it's very, very British. This is the Anglican Cathedral in the capital of what was it?
Port Stanley.
Port Stanley, yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
And if you see that little arch in front of the cathedral, that is made of whale bones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was fascinating.
Yeah. Interesting little town.
The church is so beautiful. The cathedral is so beautiful. You wouldn't expect to see anything quite so beautiful in the Falklands, but it was.
Yeah. Then the next 3 days were at sea because the next port, as I mentioned earlier, was the weather was too bad for us to get in. So after 3 days, we got to Montevideo, Uruguay, and a very interesting town. It's sort of a modern town, and this is the main central square, and the building behind it is the presidential office building. So again, a very very nice, relatively modern city, Montevideo. And then finally, we did get up to Buenos Aires and met with the Cias.
Right.
And this is the famous pink house, which was is the seat of the government there, and that's where Eva Perón stood on the balcony and gave her speeches to the poor farmers, and that's an iconic scene in Evita.
Immortalized in the landmark musical Evita.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by this time, coronavirus was starting to be a concern particularly in Buenos Aires. And so a lot of things were closed. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the cathedral in Buenos Aires, and this is where the current Pope was the Archbishop before he became Pope.
Okay.
Very,
That was
beautiful,
so beautiful.
church.
Oh,
Beautiful.
my goodness.
This has really
Yeah.
been great fun, and it's been great fun seeing the photos and everything, Ian and Jerry. As we conclude here, I've got to ask you, what's your feeling? What's your prognosis about future travel?
Well, the more I hear, the more I'm concerned that this whole thing will be prolonged and that travel will be restricted for quite a while. I'm still hoping that we can do our trip in January from Rome to Barcelona. The fly in the ointment is that the ship is currently being built in Italy, so we don't know what the problems in Italy are doing to the construction schedule.
Well,
So
the building
we just have to keep our
maybe
fingers
delayed.
crossed.
Yeah.
And then next summer, at the end of July, we plan to go from Oslo to Bergen to Iceland, which Iceland has been on my bucket list forever.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's really hard to say what's going to happen. My cousin wrote to me last night. He lives in California, and he was saying the Harvard Medical School said that for people like us, we're not going to be traveling till 2022.
2022.
I don't know.
I find that hard to believe, and I just hope
Yeah.
it doesn't happen that way.
Well, listen, it's been great. This was a great chat. Be well. Take care of yourselves there. I know you have a lovely home. You've got plenty of room to roam in that home.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're all getting a little bit of cabin fever at this point, if not
You
worse.
got it. Yeah.
And we'll chat again. And this is great. And we're going to share it on social media. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Dan.
Thank
and
you,
take
Dan.
care of yourself too.
Take care and say hi to Carol.
I will. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.